Lawmakers, business leaders, activists and other delegates are meeting in Glasgow, Scotland during the final week of the COP26 Climate Summit. Delegates have been asked to speed up their action on climate change and commit to more ambitious cuts in greenhouse gas emissions to limit global warming. South African business delegates are also attending the talks as Eskom is currently implementing stage 4 blackouts, and we are away to hear that briefing later this afternoon after 4 o'clock. But let's go to Glasgow now, and I'm joined by eNCA senior reporter Siphamandla Goge. Siphamandla, any positive developments at the COP26 today that you can tell us about this hour?
Well, except to say that negotiations are underway with these conferences, climate change conferences. Usually the way they proceed is that you will have concrete details and statements towards the end of the conference. As we speak now, it's just a group of ministers from across the world and negotiators logged in back-to-back meetings. Those are behind or closed-door meetings. They are busy discussing and trying to find a consensus, and they are fast running out of time. So to answer your question, there is nothing formal and official that has been communicated except to say the meetings are ongoing, and they usually take time. Remember, here you are dealing with more than 200 countries, all of them with different business, environment and political interests. So at the end of the day, it boils down to one thing and one thing only: interest. All countries, when they negotiate, they look after their interests. But I can tell you that there appears to be a strong push from the African group of ministers to have developed nations and wealthier countries honoring their financial commitments, particularly when it comes to climate finance. We understand that behind closed doors, that issue of climate finance is taking shape, with the African group pushing hard to have at least the developed nations committing into honoring their financial commitments by the end of a climate change conference known as COP26 here in Glasgow. That issue of climate finance is the one which led to the collapse of what was COP25 in Madrid, Spain 2 years ago, and all parties were hoping that COP26 would somehow reach a consensus and there will be progress in that regard. So as we speak, the conference is underway, talks are ongoing. Of course, there are other side events that are taking place here. You are likely to hear announcements that deals have been made, but up until it comes from the president of COP26 that it's official, you do not take it as official, and there will be what is known as the text, which is a document that will be released towards the end of this conference, and that document known as the text will be the one that will spell out what has been agreed upon and what is outstanding. And I can pretty much tell you that the South African delegation, while it's still locked in the meeting, but on the South African pavilion here on my right, there are side events that are taking place. But then you've got a group of business people and representatives that are also here, ensuring that they represent their various companies. And earlier on, we were able just to speak to some of the business people and the companies that are here. And I can tell you that businesses are essential and crucial when it comes to the issue of ensuring that just transition takes place in South Africa, and they will be part of that. But the Minister of Environment, Fisheries in South Africa, Barbara Creecy, was very clear to say that the country will be pushing hard for 3 issues here: the issue of mitigation, adaptation, as well as climate finance. But she has also urged South African businesses, civil society to work together during this transition process. Let's take a listen to what she had to say.
Investment in the green economy and green technologies provides strategic advantages for our country and our continent. It opens access to new green financing opportunities. It offers the possibility of significant proven job creation. It has potential to localize production and services, which will build small and medium enterprises. And of course, it enhances our long-term competitiveness while mitigating our climate risk.
Well, Siphamandla, it looks like the world is deciding to move very strongly in a focused way towards a low-carbon economy. I just wonder how business, especially big business, is thinking of capitalizing on this and how they're going to be supporting this move to this low-carbon economy.
Well, they say there are opportunities there. Of course, they are central and instrumental in this just transition, because it cannot only be led by government. In fact, government alone doesn't have capacity to carry on with this just transition, and you would need those sectors in the economy which rely on high carbon business initiatives to adapt and adjust and embrace low carbon economy. And I can tell you that you've got a number of South African companies that are here. In fact, I will ask my colleague Joe Komane to show you here a number of those companies, particularly those who play in the space of mining here. They are part of this climate change conference COP26 here at Glasgow, and they are part of the South African stand. And I've spotted one interesting lady before we proceed here. I'm going to ask Joe to zoom in there on my left. There is a session underway at the South African Pavilion, and there is a lady there sitting over there wearing a black mask, sitting between two gentlemen further up there. She's representing Eskom. If I'm not mistaken, she's the one who's speaking right now. Her name is Mandy. She's, of course, General Manager for Just Energy Transition at Eskom. So she's part of this delegation from South Africa and from Eskom. Eskom CEO Andre Director was here earlier on. I'm reliably informed that he has left Glasgow going back to South Africa because there are pressing matters to attend to back home. 2 days ago, I interviewed him, and he told me that if things went bad from back home, he was going to leave Glasgow and go back to South Africa. The issue of the load shedding and rolling blackouts, of course, has forced him to return back to South Africa. But big business is saying they will be capitalizing on these opportunities that will be presented by the green transition here. Let's take a listen to what one of the CEOs of the big business had to say about this.
For me, the key issue that I would want to see is that the commitments that have been made in the Framework Convention for the developed world to provide finance, technology and capacity to the developing world is one that is taken extremely seriously, and that it is backed by the necessary finance, and so that the 100 billion that has been committed is realized, and that then lays the basis for much greater levels of resources and for support to come to developing countries, including our own.
Siphamandla, you've just mentioned his name there as you were answering the question just now about business and how they were going to capitalize on this new low-carbon economy, this just transition. Andre Director, the CEO of Eskom, is come back to South Africa amid calls for him to step down. We are anticipating that he'll be giving a briefing here at about 4 o'clock. And we're going to be taking it live here on eNCA in just about an hour and 15 minutes from now. But these calls for him to resign are coming from all quarters, particularly the unions. I've just interviewed the NUM, and they are saying he and the board must go.
Indeed, and I can tell you that that issue of Eskom is dominating the South African pavilion here in Glasgow at COP26. You've got a number of South African business CEOs that are here. You know, behind the scenes, they are worried and talking about the issue of unstable power supply and rolling blackouts back home in South Africa. And Director was leading the Eskom delegation here at Glasgow. Remember that for this just transition to take place, Eskom has to be at the center of that. You are talking about a number of coal-fired power stations that will have to be decommissioned belonging to Eskom. You've just have two recently completed power plants, Medupi and Kusile. Most of the country's energy or electricity is generated through coal. So Eskom is at the center of this just transition. And Director is the one who was meant to be talking here today, but he has left because there are calls for him to step down in the entire board of Eskom. But the BUSA CEO, Business Unity of South Africa CEO, has defended Director, saying it's unfair to call for his head, saying, well, the only thing that is needed now is for the country to move on with its energy mix to ensure that there is a stable power supply in the country. Let's take a listen to what BUSA CEO had to say about those calls for Eskom CEO to step down.
I've interacted with the CEO of Eskom here and before. I don't think it's appropriate to call for his head. I think the bottom line is that I think he's got one of the toughest jobs in the country. We all know what's happened at Eskom. The blackouts are obviously a problem. They have a significant economic impact. They have an impact on people's daily lives in their homes. They have an impact on students. We need to deal with it. But what I find very encouraging coming from the CEO of Eskom is that he is no longer saying, Eskom is no longer saying, that we are the only game in town. He's saying that if we're going to invest, we shouldn't be investing in new coal power plants. We shouldn't be investing that much money in keeping old power plants going. We should be investing money in renewable energy. We should be investing money in new forms of energy, cleaner energy. And I think that's a very, very good message coming from Eskom. So I think that we need to try and work with Eskom to do what we can to support them, to deal with the load shedding issues. But the best way, in my view, of dealing with that is to make as much progress as possible and quick progress towards renewable energy. We need to get the next tranches of renewable or the IRPs on the go. It took too long to get this tranche going, and we need to speed that up.
Okay, thank you very much, Siphamandla. So those talks, those negotiations between government ministers continuing about really the way forward. And we here in South Africa settled with the Eskom problem. And this afternoon, as I said to you a short while ago, we're going to be hearing from Eskom's Andre de Rate at about 4 o'clock. What's the next big thing, very briefly, that you are aware of, or either on the South African side or globally, that's coming up at the COP26 that you can share with our viewers?
I think starting from 4 o'clock UK time, which will be 6 o'clock South African time, we expect that parties, those are countries really, will start making their statements about the progress of these talks. And South Africa is scheduled to address around between 4:30 and 6 o'clock. So you will have a number of environmental affairs ministers from across the globe addressing, basically giving us a progress report on these talks. That's where we expect to get an idea as to whether COP26 will be a success or a failure.
Thank you very much. Siphamandla Goge in Glasgow, Scotland, at the COP26 summit with the latest. They will have to wait and see how South Africa will summarize this summit, in the words of the Environmental Affairs Minister, Barbara Creecy, who is one of the government ministers in Glasgow. Now let's come